Welcome to a very special edition of the podcast, The Lord Speaker's Corner. And my guest today is the Lord Speaker. Lord Speaker, welcome to your own podcast.
Well, I feel this is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and I'm Daddy Bear, and in a gruff way I'm saying, who's sitting in my chair? But you're welcome.
Thank you. It's not a takeover, it's not a coup. I've been invited here. For listeners, my name is Ayesha Hazarika, Baroness Hazarika. I've quite recently joined the House of Lords. I'm also a broadcaster, and I'm really delighted to sort of turn the tables on you, because we're going to move on to your life and your career, but tell us a bit about why you wanted to do this podcast, because you don't think about the House of Lords and you don't think about the Lord Speaker doing something quite modern like entering the world of podcasting.
Well, when I stood for Lord Speakership, I had manifesto commitments, and one of the manifesto commitments was to bring the House of Lords alive more to the general public, to illustrate, first of all, the type of people we have in here, their experience, their wisdom, and to say to people that it's very important as a second institution of our parliamentary democracy.
Well, we're doing this interview because you are, and I say sadly, genuinely, there's a lot of love and affection and respect for you here. You're stepping down as Lord Speaker on February the 1st this year, 2026. Just tell our listeners why you've come to that decision.
Well, I made an announcement in the Chamber in October. My dear wife, Joan, we've been married for 58 years. Going on.
Get it right.
58 years. She has had Parkinson's for the past 10 years and been becoming increasingly immobilised, and my place is at home rather than here. But I've done almost 4 3/4 years in the role. It's a 5-year role, so I've got near the end, and I've also achieved what I've set out to in the manifesto I put at the very beginning. So I've been very, very privileged to have had this role, and it's been branded in some places as the Lord Speaker is taking early retirement, to which some of my friends are bewildered and saying, John, early retirement, 81, are they aligned?
I just want to start with your own career, Lord McFall of Alcluith. I'm going to call you John from now, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
An incredible career, almost 40 years in frontline politics. You became the Member of Parliament for West Dumbartonshire in 1987. You entered the House of Lords in 2010. You became the Senior Deputy Lord Speaker in 2016. And then you eventually were elected by your peers to get this very top position as Lord Speaker in 2021. So you've had this incredible career. You've been a minister, you've been a very powerful chair of a select committee, the Treasury Select Committee. So you've had a very, very storied and rich and successful political career. And you've ended up in this beautiful building and in this beautiful grand office. But many people, when they think of the House of Lords and they think about somebody in your position, they think of people from a background with silver spoons, inherited titles, a journey of wealth and privilege, and an elite life. And your story could not be more different, because you left school, age 15, no qualifications. Your first job was working in the local park. You were a park keeper. You then went to college, Paisley College. You got yourself educated, you got yourself a degree, you're obviously very bright. You became deputy head of a school. You then became an MP, and you've now ended up as this kind of top dog in the House of Lords. Just what is it like when you look back on your life, John, and you think about your journey from the park benches, literally the park benches, to the red benches?
Well, it was pretty negative when I was 15 or 16, not knowing where I was going. And as you rightly say, the first job was in the Parks Department, weeding. And my ambition as I was weeding was that one day I would drive the tractor. Now, I missed out on that ambition, but I was hanging around. And I then went, after that, to the office of the Medical Officer of Health in Dumbarton, and I drove a van. I drove it round. There was a campaign, a Happy Smile Man campaign, and I drove the Happy Smile Man round the schools, telling people to brush their teeth and brush them regularly.
And how strongly do you feel about social mobility and aspiration? Because you often hear a critique that maybe we're moving a bit away from that in society now.
I do. The society that I was brought up in, it was a very working class society, and it was a society with relative high poverty. It was a society where, for example, say in the shipyards, some of the men would have to turn up in the morning to see if there was a job for them. And if there was a job, they got the job. If not, they were unemployed for the rest of the time. So it was a bit of a precarious one. And built into that was community. Why was community built in? Because we were living in the top of one another in many ways, so we couldn't avoid each other. And that encounter was very important. And that had great advantages, also some disadvantages with the poverty, but that encounter was very important. And my mother had a small newsagent shop right in the middle of Dumbarton in College Street. And from an early age, I was collecting the papers at the station, delivering papers in the morning, standing outside the cinemas on a Saturday evening and selling my papers, Times Citizen Final, Times Citizen Final. So I had a good wicket there. And then I went round the pubs on that. So from an early age, I was immersed in that type of community. And with the work I did in the shop from a young age, the concept of serving was really important. And you had to bring a bit of diplomatic nous to that. I remember one day this guy came in and he asked for a box of matches, Bryant and May matches. And on the front where the matches was average number 31. So I gave him his box of matches and he came back to the shop 10 minutes later after having counted them and said, "There's only 29 here." So using my diplomatic skills, I pinched 2 from another box and he went away happy.
The other thing is, coming from that background, which obviously has, given you so many skills and use that strong sense of working class community and those values, which, as we talk through your career, has obviously guided you in a lot of what you went on to do. You often hear that people that do come from different backgrounds, that haven't gone to like an elite school or an elite university, sometimes when they get to Westminster and they get to politics, they don't feel they've got the confidence to know how to navigate, not even so much the intellectual rigour of Westminster, but the kind of social codes and the etiquette and the sort of culture. Some people often speak about feeling out of place or having imposter syndrome. Did you ever feel any of that?
I probably lacked confidence a bit. I would never subscribe to imposter syndrome, but I felt it was such a privilege being an MP, and being a minister or doing anything else was out of the question, because I would never have thought I would have been an MP.
Well, it's just an incredible story, because I think, and also it's a very inspiring story, because a lot of people don't know what they want to do when they're 15 or 16 or even 18 or 19. And a lot of people can come into politics and public life when they're a bit older and they've done other things. So I think, your story does show you can be a late starter and a great bloomer as well in your career. And as I said, you're the proud MP for West Dumbartonshire, and there's many things you did, but what's the thing you're most proud of?
I don't like to talk about legacies or whatever else, because I see people around me doing things on a daily basis in a quiet way, and they're heroic. They talk about saints, certain people are saints and you pray to these saints. I see in my daily life saints that have done things in a very quiet, heroic way, going about their business. So I don't think I want to separate myself from people. And I did this job, and I think I had resilience and endurance. And I feel that the good Lord gave me talents, but not enough talents. And I think it was a wee bit mean with me. But what I did is I squeezed the talents as hard as I could, the small number I had. So if I'm going to go up there someday, I'll say, look, you weren't very good to me, but I did squeeze the talents. How about an entry?
The outfit is very reminiscent of a Presbyterian minister. And you, of course, are a man of faith. You are a Catholic. How important has faith been to you in your life and your work?
Well, actually, I don't like to wear my faith on my arm. I don't think that plays. But it imbues your moral, your ethical framework, and that aspect is really important in faith. But if you look at faith in politics, the praxis, the essence of faith, and indeed the essence of politics, is humanity. So they have a shared primary objective, and the essence of humanity is to engage, to talk, to listen to one another, so that we can build a better society for that. The secular one, the politics on earth, the faith one elsewhere. So they have the same aim, humanity.
And those guiding principles stood you in good stead for a lot of the work that you went on to do. But something I'm really struck by is your time as a minister, particularly when Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister, appointed you as a minister in the Office for Northern Ireland. And you were a very new minister when a terrible thing happened, the Omagh bombing. I believe you were the first minister on the scene. Tell us about that.
When I was appointed, it was in August 1998, and I went across to Northern Ireland for the first time on the Friday. But my colleagues had said to me, all of them, Mo, Paul, Adam, look, this is a holiday period. You are very fortunate that you've been appointed at this time. So you go across, spend the weekend at Hillsborough Castle, study, obviously, your brief as a minister, and it'll be a relaxing weekend for you. So that was the very first day. We arrived on the Friday evening, so that was the very first full day I was there. And I was studying my brief in the afternoon, and I think it was about 3:20 when I got a call from a private secretary, a brilliant guy, Paul Dolligan. He was wonderful to me. He phoned me. He says, I've got news for you. There's been a bomb in Omagh, so the security people and the MI5, etc., they'll all be out at the Hillsborough chatting to you. So they did come out, and it was obviously bewildering at the time. But about 20 to 4, I remember, this was the 15th of August, 1998, 20 to 4, Tony Blair phoned me from France. He was on holiday in France, and he asked for an assessment. And the security officials were saying to me that as of 20 to 4, 30 minutes after the bomb went off at 3:10, 5 people had been identified as dead. If you go back to the previous incident in Enniskillen, the dead half an hour after it went off, I don't know if it was 1, but if it was 1, it was only 1. So the advice I was getting was that this will be bigger than Enniskillen by the looks of it. So Tony Blair felt that he had to come across. John Prescott came across on the Saturday, but Tony came on the Sunday. So within a couple of hours of the bomb being triggered, I was in Omagh, the security and my team, looking at the devastation, and it's quite sobering looking back on it.
And it was a devastating attack. 29 people lost their lives, Catholic and Protestant, many children, huge numbers of people injured as well. Tell us about how you navigated an already very sectarian situation, now overlaid with death, pain, mourning, anger, very raw emotions. How did you navigate that Particularly, if you don't mind me saying, as a Catholic minister.
Well, I was in the high street in Omagh, looking at the devastation, obviously, and then we went to the hospital, but the hospital was overloaded and there were individuals outside lying, just waiting to get in. But we had practical things to consider. For example, the number of dead, about the funeral arranged their coffins or whatever else, the registration offices which had been blown up. How do we get the death certificates? When John Prescott came the next day and we flew down by helicopter, we were in the high street in Omagh saying to people, this is an attack on the peace process itself. And I can't underestimate the significance of that.
What do you think you learned from that experience?
I learned that weapons win a war, but dialogue wins the peace. And if dialogue wins the peace, you got to bridge that gap and bring people together. And I remember the MP, the Ulster Unionist MP, I think at the time was Willie Thompson, but he'd been on to my office to ask if he could join us at in the High Street in Omagh, wherever else. And I think somebody said, yeah, well, it's maybe not advisable. And I thought, well, yeah, it's advisable. Very important. This is Willie's constituency. He should be here, in a prominent position along with us, so that you could see that ministers and MPs, Catholics and Protestants, were together in Omagh making the point. And that dialogue and that engagement, that has solidified for me in any position I've been in. And you need that dialogue to change.
I mean, it feels like the profound shock and the profound horror of what you witnessed in Omagh maybe did guide you throughout the rest of your career. Would you say that's true?
I would. And what I'd also say, without diminishing the contribution of Tony Blair, John Major, David Trimble, John Hume, Seamus Marlin, you name them all, without diminishing anything like that, in my guts is the understanding that the peace process was delivered by the individuals in Northern Ireland themselves.
And I'm not asking you to comment on one party or another, but do you think we are in danger of our politics becoming too tribal right now? Because behind the scenes in politics, in the Commons and in the Lords, there is a lot of cross-party working. But do you think our politics has become kind of too performatively tribal?
Yeah, we're experiencing worldwide a populist surge identified by division and short-term thinking in the immediate. And the problems facing politics at the moment will not be solved on an electoral cycle basis of 5 years. They're long-term problems, and the only way we can solve those problems is encountering each other, not just listening to each other, but understanding each other. Whether we're talking about AI, whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about inequality, these are big, big issues, amongst others, that we need to look at.
Let's move on to your time as chair of the Treasury Select Committee. You did that for a long stint, 9 years. It was a huge time because we had the global financial crisis. You asked some tough questions. You were quite rude to some people, they felt.
Never.
But people felt you were fair. But tell us about your time, because I feel that's a very kind of seminal role that you held.
When at the end of my time, Mervyn King came before the committee, the Governor of the Bank of England, and said you should be proud of some of the achievements that you've made, that you've changed legislation for the better here and public policy as a result of that. And had you not asked the tough questions, we wouldn't have been in the position that we're in today. So you really need to probe and ask the tough questions.
I'm just going to read out a couple of your quotes. You said of on Northern Rock, you accused the person of being asleep in the back shop while there had been a mugging out front.
When the bankers came before us, it was obvious from the briefings in the paper. They would come before us and they would apologise. So there were four of them. Mr. Chairman, we apologise. Mr. We apologise. We apologise. We apologise. And I said, well, what are you apologising for? Is it your behaviour or is it the system? And they never answered it. They were apologising for the system, but not for their behaviour. So what I was trying to do there was probe the moral centre of them and what they thought and what their obligations were, not just to their customers but to society as a result. And getting ourselves in this position, that's been cataclysmic, and we're still living with the effects of that at the end of the day.
And how important do you think select committees are in the kind of ecosystem of Parliament now? Very
important, because over the past 40 or 50 years, what's happened is that the executive has accrued power to itself away from Parliament. You'll hear quite regularly Mr. Speaker doing his duster at times about a statement not being made in Parliament, but being made elsewhere as a result. So if Parliament is the fulcrum of democracy, then it should be made there as a result. So the chamber itself should be having more powers, taking them back from the executive rather than away.
Obviously, you're in Westminster and you've got this very important position as chair of the Treasury Select Committee, but you're balancing that against being a constituency MP as well. How did you balance both of those roles? And from a constituency side, what were you really pleased in terms of what you managed to achieve?
Yeah, well, I was born in Dumbarton, raised, and I told you about my first job. Where I live at the moment is that if I go into my dining room and look out the window, 200 steps away is the first bed which I weeded. So everything's local. Everybody knows me as John, nothing else. And in fact, I remember two young boys stopped me just after I went in the House of Lords. I was out in the garden and they came across and they chatted away. They would chat to me always. And then one of them said, "Hey John, do we need to call you Lord from now on?" To which his friend said, and I won't repeat it, "Don't be so bleep daft." So that's it. So my commitment as a local person was very, very important. And there were a number of issues that come up. For example, national parks. Believe it or not, Scotland at that time had no national parks, while national parks were established in England in 1947. So I set up a campaign. Work had been done before, but I set up the campaign.
And you got that done.
And we got it done. We ran out of time in the Westminster Parliament because the devolved powers were transferred. But the first act almost of the Scottish Parliament was National Park for Loch Lomond. So that was one.
You decide to step back from Parliament in 2010, but obviously you're not done with your life in politics because you get a call from Downing Street offering you a peerage. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, my family were delighted, and the local paper, the Lennox Herald, had one of their billboards in the front of the shops that said, "John McFall retires from politics of 2010. So my family, every now and again, send me this just to remind me that, I didn't keep that promise to stand down.
And where were you when you got the call?
Well, I was on the train from London to Glasgow, and I was on a carriage where I think there was a playgroup there, and there must have been about a dozen or more kids just jumping up and down the aisle and screaming and throwing beach balls or goodness knows whatever else. And the phone went, and I just couldn't understand who was on the other end of the phone. And I said, "Look, I can't hear you. You'll just have to phone back. I'm arriving in Glasgow Central at sort of a certain time. So if you could phone me then, I'd be quite happy." So I get to Glasgow Central, and they phoned me, as they said. I said, "Hello." They say, "Yeah, this is Downing Street." "Oh," I said, "Downing Street. Now, if I'd missed this call, what did that mean?" "Well, the Prime Minister would like you to get into the House of Lords."
Now, you enter the Lords. You're very busy carrying on your work, looking at a lot of issues around banking, which is very important. You're doing a lot of good cross-party work. You become the Senior Deputy Speaker in 2016. which is a very important time. You really use your experience from the Treasury Select Committee to sort of spruce up select committees in the House of Lords. You help steer the House through COVID, and then you decide to run for Lord Speaker in 2021. And you ran on a manifesto. Let me remind you some of your manifesto pledges. You wanted cultural and managerial change. You wanted reform with purpose. You wanted better communication of what the Lords does. Another thing that you've spent a lot of time on is this interparliamentary forum, which is about trying to knit together the whole of the Union and all four nations. Tell us a wee bit about that.
Well, I did say I'd defend the Union. You know, when we had the referendum in Scotland came, I was of the opinion that independence wasn't the way forward, because we've got a 5 million population aside a 65 million population. So we need to knit ourselves together even more. There's an exceptionalism to Westminster, and Westminster tells people what to do. That should break down. So the Interparliamentary Forum, I wanted people to come together on an equal basis. And I visited the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly then, now Welsh Parliament, and Northern Ireland Assembly. I got the endorsement of their speakers to this Interparliamentary Forum, which was an informal body, not a formal body, but bringing people together. And at Brexit, the First Minister of Wales and others said it was really helpful to them, because the internal market, for example, is a big issue which affects the devolved areas. They had their voice heard as the legislation was going through. So that's important. That's kept going to this day. And I was quite proud of the fact that when they came to Westminster, we had the DUP and Sinn Féin representatives aligned and had a photograph together along with the rest of the group.
And you've also had quite an international focus in your role as well, welcoming leaders of other countries to speak in the Lords, but you yourself also visiting. I believe you went to Poland as well, and you travel a lot. How important is that kind of international bridge?
The essence of the House of Lords is soft power. That's what it's about. We've had a great reputation in the House of Lords for making great reports. But the question is, where do these reports go? You know, do we just put them in the chamber and discuss them and not have a louder voice? So I reviewed the committees to ensure we had, if you like, a more extensive footprint, a more Gulliver footprint, but looking at the issues of the day and engaging with people abroad as a result of that. In my visit to Poland, the MOD were on to us, the ministers, and they said, look, we think it's very important that you go there just to consolidate the relationship. And the Speaker of the Upper House in Poland, she couldn't have been more gracious in engaging with me. And I ended up in a helicopter visit to the northeast of the country, where I saw the Americans, the British, the European troops working near Belarus and digging trenches as a result. And it came alive for me, if you like, the possible peril that we're in here. And the Army General said to me, he said, our role as Army people is to look down all the time. But he says, we're now in a different world and we've got to look up with drones on that. And we need to be battle ready as a result. So that was very important. And I got the views of the troops in the northeast, wrote a letter along with the ambassador to Poland, to the MOD, to John Healey, to give us their views on that. But I don't have any executive role, but I'm a witness and I have the soft power, and that's the soft power of the House of Lords that's really important. And in essence, we've got the House of Commons now, which does not do scrutiny. You'll know yourself in the short time you've been here just how much effort is put into scrutinise. And it's all about good law. And why is it good law? Because good law gives us certainty, less misunderstanding, and helps the temper of society. That's very important. So that good law is really important, and the House of Lords does that very well. But
so it does the job, in your view, of your saying that you don't think the quality of legislation that comes up from the Commons is very good, and it gets cleaned up in the House of Lords.
It's not just as very good; it's unexamined largely, because the nature of MPs' jobs has changed in many ways. First of all, they introduced a guillotine programme motion, which curtails the length of debate. And secondly, MPs, they're in a more difficult position than I was in and my contemporaries, because they've now got social media to deal with. So they're under constant pressure, and their focus is more outward, and that's at the expense of scrutiny. So it's the House of Lords that does the scrutiny. And look at the type of people that are here in the House of Lords, whether we're talking about silence, whether we're talking about Robert Winston, whether we're talking about former chiefs of staff, whether we're talking about climate scientists, whether we're talking about financiers as a result. The Economic Committee, the Governor of the Bank of England, former Governor, former Chancellor is on it. Other distinguished people who've worked for the World Bank and others are on it. Are there problems? Of course there are problems. Do we need to reform? Absolutely. And we need to reduce the size of the Lords.
So I think lots of people absolutely agree with you about the calibre of those people coming in. The Lords at its best is a cauldron of wisdom and expertise and really high calibre people who have done extraordinary things across many, many disciplines. But, and I'm going to challenge you on this, we also have to be honest, there's a lot of people that come into the Lords who the public regard, and this is from all parties, I'm not picking on one party, particularly with prime ministerial lists and prime ministerial appointments, they don't look at those people as experts. They think there's a lot of rewards and political cronyism coming into the Lords.
Yeah, I've always lived by the slogan in politics, perception is reality. If you're an MP and people have a perception, you've got to challenge that perception, engage with them on that perception. My point of view is that we need to get the numbers down, but we need to change arrangements. For example, HOLAC, the House of Lords Appointments Committee, that needs to change, needs to give it more power and authority. It's accountable to the Cabinet Office. It should be independent. Right? It's limited by the number of crossbenchers. In 2012, David Cameron inexplicably asked the House of Lords Appointments Committee to limit the number of crossbenchers to 2. So when it was started in 2000
just
to 2012, 2 a year. From 2000 to 2012, there were 59 crossbenchers appointed. From 2012 to 2024, there were 15. So if we're going to be the best think tank in the country, if we're going to be a house of expertise, we need to have more crossbenchers in as well. So what would your message be to political leaders and future prime ministers and current prime ministers and past prime ministers? What is your message to them about doing these very long lists of political appointees? Well, my message to prime ministers would be take your finger out the pie and allow quite a bit of independence. But prime ministers have to have the latitude to appoint certain people to become ministers or whatever else. So there's a latitude there. But at the end of the day, what should happen, I think, is that the House of Lords Appointments Committee, being more independent, should interview every person who is a possible member of the House of Lords, and interview them in terms not just in their propriety, which is the sole criterion at the moment, but in their qualifications, in the skills they have, in the contribution they think that they will make to it, in their commitment to be turning up and engaging, and not just see the House of Lords as a sinecure, but see it as a place of work. We have to have politicians in it. I mean, I'm a former politician, so it'd be silly not to have that. And if you've got Parliament, you've got the two chambers, House of Commons and House of Lords, they've got to work closely together. I mean, for example, Mr. Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle and I, we have a close working relationship because it's essential that we've got joint responsibilities, not least R&R, restoration and renewal, not least security and other issues. So we need that joint approach, and that element is really important.
And do you think that there is a danger that the House of Lords, because it is growing in size and because there are more political appointments coming in, particularly recently former ex-MPs, do you think there's a danger that the Chamber and the House of Lords could become more political and start to replicate some of the more Punch and Judy elements that you see in the House of Commons?
Well, the essence of politics is about choice. So you've got to be aware of that. And this is a political chamber, but possibly not as sharply political or partisan as the House of Commons. Take, for example, the amendments that we send. I think in the year 2022-23, there were about 1,300 amendments that were sent from here to the House of Commons. Only 83, if I remember, were a result of divisions. In other words, a difference of opinion. Most of them were agreed here as a result and accepted even before it went to the House, because we can use the floor of the House, and particularly government can use the floor of the House and see where the deficiencies in their legislation arise and get it fixed. I mean, talking to ex-ministers, for example, David Blunkett, Michael Forsyth, Helen Liddle and others. I mean, I remember Helen Liddle saying to me that when she was in the Treasury, she was in charge of energy, and she would come along to the Lords to listen, and she got an education by listening to them, and she was grateful for the clean-up of her legislation as a result of that. What happens along the other end is that when the bills have been put forward, every department has a say, so it ends up a bit of a merry-go-round as a result, and it could be in occasions the least worst option. So this is the clean-up place, and how I describe the role of the House of Lords is this: we clean up the legislation that comes from the House of Commons. We clean their face, and like any good parent, if they send it back to us, we make great effort in cleaning it again. Now, we'll maybe tolerate it a third time and apply the Brillo pads and send them back. But see, if it goes beyond that, we'll say, like any frustrated parent, well, you've made your bed, lie on it.
One of the ideas for reform that has been put forward is to have an elected second chamber. So do away with the appointments and make it all elected. Would you be nervous about that in terms of how the two chambers would then operate, or do you think there's merits in that idea?
Yeah. You've got to look at the nature of this chamber, and what this chamber does is add value to the democratic process. People say it's undemocratic, but what we do is we assist democracy. And if you look at the outside, what other bodies assist democracy? You know, we've got the Supreme Court, we've got chief constables, we've got the financial services. All of them assist democracy. So the House of Lords should be seen as assisting democracy with the House of Commons sovereign. You introduce a democratic element into the House of Lords, and like the US Congress, which came before the House of Representatives, they'll feel they're equal in merit to the other chamber.
So John, if I was asked, just to sort of sum up what you really do think the kind of spirit and essence of the Lords is, particularly in relation to the House of Commons?
Well, again, my experience now over 15 going on 16 years here is it's a house of expertise that reaches out to society, that it is the best think tank in the country, given the experts that are here as a result of that. It's one where deep thought is engaged in, not theatre, just for the sake of theatre, and one which doesn't engage in Punch and Judy, which we don't do here, and also one which is looking at the future of humanity and the long-term consequences of our present situation and what we do about it. And that would be, in my opinion, real added value, and at the same time engaging society to assist the notion that all trust is lost and nothing works.
Well, Joan, we're coming to the end of our time, and it's been a great pleasure for me to speak with you. What are you going to miss most about being Lord Speaker?
I'm going to miss the friendliness and engagement. As Lord Speaker, I feel really supported in this job. And believe it or not, you know, as a roughneck West of Scotland guy, I can get a bit sentimental about that. But people have been good to me, and I'll take away the good memories from that. And also the fact that I've really been blessed as a late developer to occupy a situation like this, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you for all you've done being Lord Speaker. As a new peer coming into a very strange world, you were a friendly face, your door was always open, and I think you've helped new peers like myself and so many others. Thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, Interim Lord Speaker, thank you.